So now we're going to deal a little bit more about color correction and how to change photos for different uses. So let's go ahead and open up the next one that we're going to be using. I'm going to click on Open, and the next file we're going to be using is called Storm. And I'm going to make sure that I'm in the photography workspace. And the first thing that's going to pop up that I want you to look at in the photography workspace is the histogram. So the histogram is telling us color information and exposure information about this photo. And you can see that it doesn't go across the whole histogram. And so it's telling us this should be pure white over to the right and pure black over to the left. It is telling us that this is not properly exposed. We don't have any true white in this photo, and we don't have any true black. So we need to deal with the exposure of this photo. We also need to deal with the color of this photo, because this is supposed to be a blue sky, and you can see that we have a lot more red and yellow than we should for this blue sky. And if you look at this, you should be able to see that there is a tinge of yellow in it, and that we can get rid of that. And that yellow actually has a lot of red in it. So we're going to use an adjustment layer to fix this. In your layers panel, you will see that you have the photo. At the bottom of the layers panel, it looks like a little yin-yang symbol. You're going to click on that. That's going to add an adjustment layer. And there's a lot we can choose. We're going to choose the one called Curves. And you can see that it has added a new layer to our layers panel called Curves, and it put a layer mask on it. And it's popped up the Properties panel for the Curves adjustment layer. So this is another little histogram on here. White is the bottom slider. It shows true white and true black. So the kind of easiest way to mess with exposure is to say, hey, the lightest thing that you see in this photo is pure white. So I'm going to pick that white slider up and move it. And do you see how it's lightening up everything? Also, look at your histogram in the upper right. The histogram has now moved over so that we have true whites. Let's do the same thing with the black slider. Pick it up and move it and say the darkest thing you see should be true black. And our histogram has spread out. Now I didn't go all the way over because I thought that was a little extreme. So that looks good. It's a little dramatic. I'm going to let the AI tell me what it thinks it should look like by clicking this auto. In fact, usually the first thing I do is just click auto and let Photoshop tell me what it thinks I should do. So go ahead and click auto and let's see how it changes it from what we just did. So you can see that it kind of did what we did, but it's not as extreme. And it's also moved this diagonal line and made it into an S-curve. So the diagonal line is the amount of white. So you see it's at 100% up here. You can kind of move those around and then click Control-Z to undo if you want to see how they work. I'm going to change that a little bit and bring it a little bit more light and a little bit more dark. So kind of go back a little bit what we had. That looks pretty good to me as far as exposure goes. Now let's deal with the color. So here in the histogram, right now we've been dealing with all the colors together because we're dealing with exposure. But now let's deal just with blue. So click on the little RGB up here at the top and let's go to just the blue channel. So it's telling us that is the blue that is there. So let's pick this up and move the blue to put more blue in it. Now, if you go all the way over, I think that's a little extreme. So I would go about halfway. And if you want to see what it looks like before to comparison, go back down to your layers panel, turn the eyeball on and off on the curves layer, and you can see that we've actually pretty much dramatically changed this. It looks a lot better, I think. So to me, the blue is looking a little good, but much better than it did. Now let's deal with this amount of yellow and red that we're seeing in there. I can see this yellow haze and the red, like especially where I'm pointing on my mouse. I can really see that. So go back up and let's change to the red channel. Now this time we don't want to deal with these bottom sliders. We want to deal with the amount of red, which would be this diagonal line. So I'm just going to pick up that diagonal line and say, I don't want to see so much red. And that's just pulling down the amount of red. And once again, if we turn it on and off, you can see that is a lot more blue. We've got darker blues. I think that that's looking a lot better. I'm going to pull down red just a little bit more. There we go. So that's a lot better color correction and exposure on that photo. Now let's talk about how we could save this. If we were going to save this, let's say this needs to be used on a website. We do need to make sure it is in RGB. So we're going to go to Image, Mode, RGB. And now we need to worry about the size of this image because this is going to go on the web. If we had a really huge file, it would take forever to load on the internet. So we need to make sure that the file size is decent. So let's save this for the web. We're going to say File, Export, Export As. And this is going to pull up. So it probably is going to default to JPEG, and that's fine. This is usually where it defaults to. And it's telling us if we save it right now, it's going to be almost 1 megabyte. So not that big, well, 700 kilobytes, 1 megabyte. Let's change that to PNG and see how big it is. You can see it's almost 5 times the size. Now PNG is a better file size. It's a better format. It saves more information. JPEG just throws away information. In fact, you should never keep opening up a JPEG and saving it. Every time you save it, it throws away information. So in general, PNGs are better because they're better files that do not compress and throw away things. However, if this is going directly to the web, a larger file size would cause problems with the website. So we are going to stay with JPEG. And you can see this quality slider. So let's see if I bring the quality down, what does it do to our file size? It is a lot smaller now. Now one way you can see, let me make this bigger for a second so you can see. You see where it says 2 up right here? It's telling us right now, this is our original, this is what it would look like if we brought it down to only 2%. That is a lot smaller as far as our file size goes, but it is looking a little compressed and strange to me. So you can always do this to see, is it worth it for me to go down in file size if it's going to make my photo look bad? So I'm going to choose somewhere kind of in the middle, and let's see if we see a difference. I am not, well, I'm seeing a little bit of difference in the blacks. At 5, that looks pretty good to me. And do you see that we've got a much smaller file size, which is going to work better for the web? So I think a 5 would work well. So let's go ahead and hit export, and we're going to put it in our work in progress folder. And I'm going to name this Robert's Storm for Web JPEG, and hit save. So the next one we're going to be using is called food.jpg. Now you might look at this and think it's okay, except for that salmon is really ugly. So I'm in the photography workspace. Most people would think that this was okay. I'm going to just show you something here. I'm going to grab the eyedropper tool and grab something that I think is probably supposed to be white and just click on it. And it has added it over here to the main foreground color. If I double click on that, you can see that is not actually white, it is green. So we could use the curves level that we just used. We're going to use a different adjustment for that. So go back down to your adjustments, click on it, and we're going to add the one called color balance. So what's good about color balance is you can adjust these colors for the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. So the main problems we're having with this one is the midtones and the highlights. So let's stay on midtones. And we have too much green. So what you're going to do, in fact, if you look at the histogram, you can see the green is really pushing high over here in the highlights where the white should be. So you're going to do the opposite of whatever it is. There's too much green, so we're going to add some magenta into this to pull that green down. And once again, you can go and turn it on and off and see, I can tell a big difference. In fact, you may not have even realized that this is supposed to be gray. The placemat is supposed to be gray. So pull that green down until that looks a little bit gray. Now let's try the highlights. So click on the highlights and let's do the same thing. Let's bring some magenta into the highlights. Now it just is a little bit because you see we're pushing too much magenta. So I just added just a little bit. I'm at -5. So now we've taken the green tinge out of the whites and the midtones. But this is supposed to be salmon. I know it doesn't look good. I do not want to eat it, but we need to kind of make this a little bit more red like salmon should be. I don't want to do this from in color balance. Let's add another adjustment level. So go back down to your adjustments, and this time we're going to choose the very bottom one, which is called selective color. So on selective color, obviously we do want to deal with the reds, so make sure it's on red. And we want to pull the magenta up a little bit, and you should see that it's taking just in the reds, it's changing that salmon to be a little bit brighter. Once again, turn it on and off and see if you see it changing. I also want to darken the reds, so let's add some black into this. A little bit of black. And it's just going to add the black to the magenta. I think that's making the salmon look a lot better. Now you can see it's also changing the color of the rose over here because it's in the magenta family. Now if you didn't want that to happen, we could mask this out. So we have a mask over selective color. White to reveal, black to conceal. Right now it's revealing all of this. So let's say we do not want it to be on the rose. So I'm going to go over and get my paintbrush and make sure I'm on black. Whatever we draw in black, it's going to mask out the selective color for that. So I have my brush. Let's make sure it's kind of maybe medium hardness, and I'm going to put mine at about 120. And then I'm just going to say, make sure you are on the mask. So do you see that I added that little black on the mask? I'm saying, do not put selective color on this thing right here. And if you see our mask, it's got a little black thing over the top of that. So now it is only adding the selective color to things that are white on that mask. So now you've added 2 adjustment layers and you've masked out part of the second adjustment layer. And I think it looks a lot better than it did when we first started. That's looking a lot better. Let's go ahead and save this one for the web. File, export, save as, export, export as. That's a good file size. Let's bring it down just a tiny bit. That's a little bit better on our file size. 1500 pixels should be big enough for what we need on our website. And go ahead and export this. And I'm going to call this Robert's Food, Robert's Salmon Web. The next file you're going to need is called Smith Kids. Now this is a photo that I scanned. It was posted onto the wall with a photo frame on it, and a couple things happened. One, it's gotten discolored over the years. It has this weird white stuff around it. You can see where there was a piece of tape on it right here, and I'm not sure what this is. So the first thing we're going to use is we're going to use the crop tool to get rid of all this outside stuff we don't need. So the crop tool is the 4th one down on your toolbar. And mine is remembering the last thing I did, which is a 5x7. So let's clear that. And now you can just pick it up and drag it so that we get rid of all of the white stuff around the edges that we do not need. And once you get it the way you like it, hit enter and it will take that. So that is already looking better. Now we need to change the color and look at the exposure. So this was from a heavily smoking home. So you're seeing this weird tinge of all this kind of nicotine and stuff that was on it. We do need to color correct this, but let's deal with the exposure first. You should always kind of mess with the exposure first. So we could go back to curves or some of the things we've already learned, but let's learn a different adjustment. So go down to your adjustments, and we're going to get the one called exposure. So what I like about exposure is you could bring the entire exposure up, but that would be So what I like about exposure, we can bring the entire exposure up, but you see it's bringing up everything all at one time. I don't want to do that. I just want to bring up the midtones because human beings, no matter what their race, are all in the midtones. So the way you can bring up just the middle is called gamma correction. So I want you to adjust gamma correction and see what happens. So we don't want to do too much, but we need to up that gamma correction. I'm going to go to about 74, but you can do what you think. And I think that looks a lot better. I'm going to go turn it on and off to see before and after. You see we have much more blacks and whites. In fact, you can see that our histogram up on the right has changed, and things that are supposed to be black are actually black. Things that are supposed to be white have brightened up. So our exposure is a lot better. Now let's deal with color. Now hopefully you can look at this and see that there's way too much red. In fact, if you look at the histogram, you can see we have too much red in there. So let's add another adjustment layer and let's go back and use color balance again. And we know we have too much red. Let's deal with the midtones because her white shirt is looking pretty good. I don't think we need to deal with the highlights, just the midtones. So we know we have too much red, so let's add the opposite, which is cyan. And you don't want to go too far or they will end up looking really blue like that. So I would say I'm going with about -35 is what I'm thinking. I'm looking at their skin tone. So kind of look at their skin tone and decide, does that look more normal to you? Turn it on and off. I may have gone a little bit too far. And I'm going to add just a tiny bit of yellow because I feel like it's taken the yellow along with the red and magenta. Just a little bit. That looks a lot better. If you look at the girl with the bow in her hair, she's definitely, her skin tone is looking more natural. So now let's retouch this photo. It's pretty old. Some things have been happening to it over the years. So I'm just going to scroll my mouse to get in closer on this main girl. And you can see there's all kind of dust and things that are on her face. Remember that you can always hit the space bar to get the hand tool and then kind of move it around so you can see better. So we've got these dust and scratches that are on her. So let's talk about some of the tools we can use. In your layers panel, make sure that you are on the original layer 0 or the original layer that is the photo, because we don't want to be doing anything to these adjustment layers. We want to make sure we're on the actual photo. So I'm in the photography workspace. There's several we can use. We've got this one right here, which is called the spot healing brush, the remove tool, and the healing brush tool. So let's start with the spot healing, the spot healing tool. And you should see a little round circle appear on your screen. If you don't see it, make sure that caps lock is not on. If caps lock is on, you won't see it. If you hit your bracket keys on your keyboard, you will see you can make this bigger and smaller. Now, if you make it bigger and try and click, it's going to just do crazy stuff. So undo. You want it to be just a little bit bigger than whatever you're trying to remove. So what it's going to do is it is going to sample all around that little circle and then do an average of what it sees around the circle and fill that circle in. So that's why you don't want to be too big. Just click once and it is going to fill that in. So if you find that you can see the edges, it's because your brush needs to be a little bit softer. So up in the upper left, let's bring the about halfway. You don't want it to be really soft. If you make it softer, then you will not see the edge. Like if you're seeing a little circle when you do this, it's because your brush is too hard. So let's just go around and kind of clean up some of these main ones. One of the problems you get with this tool though, let's say when we're trying to fix this right here, it kind of gave us this weird muddy mess because of all the hair and stuff around it. Do you remember when I said when you click on it, it's going to make an average? So I'm going to undo that. This is not the right tool for that. So let's come back. We're going to get that one in a second. I know I can fix this one. Look around what else we have. Anything that's too close to the hair, we're probably going to have to use a different tool. Now let's take a second to look at this over here. I see kind of a scratch. That's a little bit too long. You can click and drag, and that does work. So try and kind of fix up the ones around her. Let's deal with that one that's right there on her eyebrow using a different tool. And we're probably going to have to do it right here. Let me see if this one works. Yeah, that's looking a little muddy. So let's talk about the other tool. This one is called the Healing Brush tool. And the difference with this one, a brush a little bit smaller, is I can click and tell it where to sample from. So with the other tool, it's going to sample everything that's around the outside of that. With this tool, you're going to click Alt and then tell it, I want you to sample from right here. Now, do you see that it's actually taking from that I just clicked on? Let me try that again. I'm going to sample from right here. Do you see that did a lot better? Let me go up to the top. So the difference here is it's not sampling for all around. It's going to sample from where we tell it. So I'm going to Alt click right there and tell it Alt, and I'm going to click right there. And so tell it sample from that. That looks a lot better than the first time we did it. Same with that. Let's see if I can do this one. I'm going to go back to the original tool and go ahead and clean up the rest of this photo real quick. So just go through and click on anything using either of those two tools. By the way, you should make sure your computer screen is clean, or you might think that you're trying to remove something that is on your screen. Now, we've got some more stuff up here. Let's try a different tool for that. This one right here is called the Remove tool, and it works very similarly, but it's going to use AI. So go ahead and make your brush. Once again, I'm using the bracket tools. And if I click on that, it's using AI, so it's going to think where does it want to sample from. So it takes a minute sometimes. It's the same as the other tool, but just think that it's using AI to kind of help this a little bit better. So this one's called the Remove tool. And you can really use any of these tools. The first two are the kind of original tools. The Remove tool is good, but when you're using it for a lot of stuff, it really takes a lot of processing power out of your computer. So hopefully you can see by using all three tools the differences between them. So now go through and finish up any mistakes you see. Don't worry about this big mistake. We're going to do that differently using any of those three tools we've just learned. Okay, so make sure to try and get as much of this clean as you can. I'm not going to make mine perfect right now because y'all don't want to watch me sitting there doing that. By the way, this is my husband's family. He was not born yet, but they're not related to me. Okay, let's talk about this down here. So this can be really hard to deal with. We're going to use a new kind of the Remove tool that we just dealt with, but I want you to get the Lasso tool that is the third one down. So with the Lasso tool, you can just kind of draw around something just freehand. And we're going to get the marching ants, which means that just this has been selected. So I'm going to use the contextual toolbar. Now, if you don't see your contextual toolbar, you can just go to Window and make sure the contextual toolbar is open. So now that I have this selected, it's going to ask me what do I want to do with it. And I'm just going to click Generate Fill. And just don't tell it to put anything in there. You could type, any weird thing you want, but if you type nothing, it's just going to kind of figure out what it wants. So let's click Generate and see what it does. Now AI usually has a really hard time with hands. Mine has done a pretty good job. Yours may or may not. If you look over here to the right, you will see that it does have the properties panel for the generative AI, and it's already given us 3 different choices, so you can click through them and see which one you think looks better. I actually think the 3rd one looks better. If you do not have good results, you can click generate again and see if it will fix it better. I like this one, so I'm going to stay with this one. So once again, we just lassoed around it and clicked generative fill, and then hit generate again and let it try and fix it for us. I think mine did a pretty good job. Everybody is going to get different results. So once you've fixed all the little mistakes and you think it's looking good, I think we'll be ready. So we're going to save this file. So this time just say File, Save as a Copy. We're going to make sure it's on JPEG, and we're going to put it in our Work in Progress folder. And let's call it your last name, Smith Kids. Save. The next file we're going to be dealing with is called beach.jpg. Now this is the type of thing that happens to people when they're trying to get married on the beach. This couple has just walked through this really nice photo. So let's see if AI can help us fix this. Once again, we're going to get the lasso tool and just draw around the people. We do want to leave her bouquet there. We're going to click on generative fill, generate. And it has done a pretty good job. Once again, over in properties, you can click through and see which one you like better, which one looks more natural. I actually think the 3rd one looks better. Now notice that it has added a 2nd layer that's called generative fill. Once again, if you do not like what you've got in your first try, you can click generate again to get some other variations. I think it did a good job on mine. And I'm going to kind of zoom in and see if sometimes there's some weird anomalies. If you see some anomalies that the AI has done, you can use any of the other tools that we have learned to kind of fix them. I'm not really seeing anything. This looks pretty good to me, so I think we are ready to save this. Let's say File, Save As. File, Save as a Copy. If you say Save As, it's going to try to save it as a Photoshop document. If you say File, Save As, you can choose what you want to change it to. We, of course, want to do a JPEG, and we're going to put it in our Work in Progress folder. And I'm going to call mine Robert's Beach Wedding. Now for the last part of the assignment, we're going to kind of put all this together to make an Instagram ad. So you're going to open up the one called tallfemale.jpg. And once you open up a JPEG photo, it's going to give you some choices down in the contextual toolbar of things it thinks you might want to do, like select subject, remove background, add an adjustment layer. You see that looks like the little adjustment layer thing we've been using. Also in properties, which is right here, you can see it's also got some quick actions that it thinks you might want to do, like crop it, rotate it, image size. It's kind of guessing what it thinks we want to do. So we do want to separate her from the background, and you can see there's kind of 2 choices. We could just click remove background, or we can click select subject. I tend to click on select subject, especially to teach you this, but it really kind of does the same thing, and it'll make sense to you once you've messed with it some. Go ahead and select subject, and let's see what the AI does for us. Now, the AI understands people, so it will select the subject if it's a person really well. It doesn't understand other things very well, and I'm sure it'll get better as it goes along. But it's chosen her, and it's done a pretty good job. In fact, if you zoom in, you can see, yeah, it's even gotten the little holes in her hair, and it got the fact that this was an empty spot right there. So that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to tell you, I know that it needs to do a better job on her hair. So we're going to mess with that before we go any farther. So if you click, we have the marching ants, and that's what it's called, meaning we have a selection. So here in the contextual toolbar, it's already thinks, do you want to add a mask? Do you want to invert the mask? Do you want to add a selection or adjustment layer to this to what we've selected? I want you to click on this first little modify selection. If you click and hold it down, it's going to ask you, do you want to smooth, like you could smooth the amount of the selection or expand it by a couple of pixels? We're going to go ahead and click this one that says select and mask, and it's going to open up a brand new menu for us. Now, if yours doesn't look like mine, it's just because we need to change some settings. So right here in view in the upper right, it probably is defaulted to onion skin, and that might make sense to you. I tend to like the one called overlay, and it's probably defaulted to be red on yours. I just changed the color. So I clicked right here. It probably looks something, I don't remember what color it looks like. It's some type of, you know, magenta. I like to choose green because there's not a lot of green in her, and I can kind of really see what this selection looks like. You can also look at the marching ants again, but I think the best way to look at it is overlay. So if we zoom way in, you can see it did not do a very good job on our hair. In fact, you know, there were a bunch of little hairs over here. We're not getting any of those. And we're kind of getting some weird thing right here. So let's fix that before we make a mask. And once again, I am kind of moving around, holding down the space bar. Now, there's this button called Refine Hair. I tend to not really like it. It works on some photos and not on others. So you can try the Refine Hair. Let me show you how to do it manually, though. You're going to go over here to the second choice, which is the Refine Edge tool. And you're going to see your little circle. Once again, we can use the bracket keys to make that bigger and smaller. And you'll probably see there's a little plus sign. So try to keep the plus sign outside of her hair, and just kind of move the mouse along it, and you will see that it's adding those hairs back. You may not be able to see it on my screen, but you'll see it on your screen. So we're just going to kind of add some of those little wispy hairs back. All around here, it's going to refine this. And say right in here where I'm looking at, do you see that it's showing the white through it? If we just click on it, do you see it's kind of fixing that for us? So just go through and refine. Sometimes you won't see it, but it definitely is making a difference. It's adding those little hairs back in. When we get it the way we like it, now when you get it the way you like it, you can kind of look at some of all this other stuff like edge detection. I like to go down on some of them. There's this in output settings. If you click on decontaminate colors, that'll kind of get rid of any little weird edge stuff that you see. So I like contaminated colors. It works on almost all of them. Sometimes it looks weird and you might want to go back and take it off. But let's go ahead and click decontaminate colors. And then you see it says output to. What do we want to output it to? We could make a new layer with a layer mask, or we could just have the selection. I'm going to say new layer with layer mask and say OK. And you can see that it's got our original layer, but it went ahead and took her and it put a mask around it. And if you look at the hair, it should look pretty good. Now I'm seeing a little bit of transparency here. Do you see that? So let's go back and fix that. I also saw some, oops, sorry about that. I also saw some over here. So it did something weird just because we were letting the AI. So I want to fix that. So I'm going to make sure I'm on the mask, and remember, white to reveal, black to conceal. So let's go find the paintbrush tool. And I don't want it to be too soft. I'm going to go to about 75% softness. I'm going to make this brush a little bit smaller with the bracket keys. And I want to bring things back. Right now, I'm not sure why it's defaulted to white on white. You can click this button right here. And we need to white to reveal, black to conceal. So we need to add white back to this so that we are not seeing through that. It's got a little bit of black. So I'm just going to put that back so we're not seeing through her shoulder. And I'm also going to do it right here so that we don't see through this edge of the hair. Yeah, see, that would look kind of weird. Now, if you happen to mess up, like do something like that, that's okay. Just, you can, so let's say we mess up and we go like that. That's fine. Just click back to black, say, no, I don't want that. I want to conceal that. So when you get this the way you want it, we are ready to move on to the next thing. So she's looking pretty good to me. I always like to look down in here and make sure there's no weird transparency things or anything sticking out that we need to fix. Okay, I see something I want to fix. Can you see that it didn't do a great job on her shoes? So once again, I'm going to make sure I'm on the mask. I want to use black because I want to get rid of all this edges. So once again, my paintbrush tool, I'm on the mask. I want to conceal this stuff. I want to conceal that. Let's move our contextual taskbar. And of course, you might want to get a smaller brush. So what's good about this is I'm drawing on the mask, not on the actual person. So I could get rid of this mask. I'm going to go over to the mask and right click and say disable. You can see I didn't actually change the photo. I just put a mask over it. So once again, I was just right click and I'm going to enable it back. So if you find out you've accidentally gotten rid of something that you need to put back, you can because it's still there. So now let's save this. So File, Save as a Copy. And this time we want to choose PNG. So you remember that PNGs were larger file sizes, and one of the reasons they're larger is because they can remember transparency. So if we saved this as a JPEG right now, it would just put her over white and it would flatten it down. So we need to save it as a PNG. So in our Work in Progress folder, make sure it's on PNG, and I'm going to call this Robert's Tall Female. And it's going to ask you this, that's fine, just say large file size, fastest saving. So we have that saved. Let's go back and open up the storm that we just fixed. So File, Open, and make sure you get the one that you have fixed. So we need to go into our Work in Progress folder and choose the one with your name that says Storm for Web. So we need to make this the right size for Instagram. So we're going to go back to the crop tool, and this time instead of just cropping it manually like we did before, we're going to go up here and choose one of the presets. So where it says ratio, click on it, and you see it has 4x5, 1x1 square, 5x7, so it has all the presets we want. So let's choose a 1x1 square for Instagram. And you can kind of move this around to choose whatever kind of part of the photo you want. I actually like this kind of lighter area. Once you get it the way you want, that's what the size it's going to be. Go ahead and hit enter or this little check mark. Oh, and I see I made a mistake right there. Do you see I left some? So I'm going to undo, Control Z, and I'm going to do that again. So once again, crop tool, square. That looks good. Enter. Better. So now we're going to say File, Place Embedded, and let's go find the girl that we just put into our. We're going to go find the Robert's Tall Female and say Place. And it has placed her inside of our design. So go ahead and check mark to say yes, we're ready to place her. Now if you need to resize her, make sure you're on that level. Make sure you have your move tool and make sure you're on the female level. You can always hit Control T, which means free transform, and then click and drag her to make her whatever size she needs to be. So I'm going to move her down a little bit here and make her a little bit bigger. I kind of don't want to see her legs. Let's make her about that size. So once again, that was free transform is Control T. And I'm going to hit enter to tell it I'm done. That's the way I want her to be. She looks pretty good. So now with your eyedropper tool, which is the, I think the fifth one down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth one down, go and choose one of the kind of dark blue, the bluest blue that you've got on your original. Say, I'm going to choose about right there. And you can see it has changed the foreground color down here to this deep blue. Now we need the rectangle tool. Now the rectangle tool is not available because we're in the photography workspace. So I'm going to click on the little three dots down here and it's going to pop open and I can see, oh, there is the rectangle tool. So let's grab the rectangle tool and you're just going to draw a rectangle from about half of her face, filling the screen. Now mine was in the right place because of where I had it selected. If yours accidentally put it on top of the female, that's fine. You see, you can just pick up and drag the layer order. So make sure that the female is on the top layer. So you just pick her up and move her. So we should have your female on the top and then the rectangle and then your background. Now, by the way, if your rectangle accidentally has a stroke around it, just make sure to select the rectangle again. And right here on stroke, you can just click on the color and say no stroke whatsoever. So it's just pure blue. All right, so click anywhere in the bottom of the layers panel to make sure none of your layers are selected because we're about to make some type, and if you have rectangle selected, it's going to put it within the rectangle and make a big mess. So we want to type some type. If you remember, blue is what we have as our foreground color. So if we were to start typing right now, we would not see it because it would be the exact same color as our background. So let's click right above the foreground color is the default foreground and background color. So click on that so we go back to just black type. Now grab the type tool and just click once somewhere in this box. And it's going to give us Lorem Ipsum, which is placeholder font. Now it's probably going to default to Myriad Pro in 12 points, which is really tiny. We can't see it. And also we don't want to use Myriad Pro because that's the default. So here in the properties panel, we're just going to click here on character and let's choose something nice and big like say impact. So choose a nice bold font. Like I said, I'm choosing impact. If you can't find impact, you could literally type it in right there. And let's choose about 72 point. We can pick it up with the move tool and kind of move it around. And with the type tool, the easiest way to select things with the type tool is click between one of the two letters. Do you see we now have the little flashing thing? If you double click, it gets one word. If you triple click, it gets the entire line. So we've now selected all this and we're going to type cloudy. Grab your move tool and let's kind of move this somewhere. Now select off of that, select anywhere, and we're going to make another one. Get the type tool again, click somewhere else and type day. Now I want day to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to click once, double click to get both of them, and let's kind of up that font a little bit. I'm going to get my move tool back and kind of move this around until I like the way it looks. You can do yours a little bit differently if you want, that's fine. Just make it look pretty. Now that I'm looking at this, I think we need more contrast between this blue and this black. So I'm going to get my type tool again. I'm going to click between the D and I'm going to get my type tool. Click between the D and the A. Double click to get that, and let's change this color to pure white. And let's do the same thing with cloudy. So click on the cloudy layer, click once between two, double click, and then let's change that to white. That has better contrast. So get this looking the way you like it. And let's save this. So file save as a copy. We're going to put it in our work in progress, and I'm going to call this my last name -insta. -insta dash cloudy day. And hit save. So you should have all of these files now. Now I don't need you to attach the tall female copy, so you'll just need these files attached to your assignment for this week. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 files. You do not need to put tall female in there. So like I said before, this is just the beginning idea of how to learn about Photoshop, but it's a really good start, and I hope you've learned a lot.